She Keeps Me Warm. Written by Root Beer Pants. Read by Arashi. Byleth looked out the tiny glass window in the war room, usually a ray of light in the room that today had been blocked out by the rain clouds hanging over the sky. Still peaceful in its own way, but not doing much to improve the boredom and dreariness of the current meeting. Ever since the war ended and those who slither in the dark were defeated, the war room has been used mainly for meetings about various other topics important to the Empire, such as infrastructure and taxes, and various things like that. Things that Byleth had no experience in, and that went over her head every time they came up. Even after everything that had happened, Byleth knew in her heart she was still much more of a fighter than anything else. Still, she could teach as well, but she mostly taught how to fight, and those skills don't exactly cross over to politics all that well. Her wife was much more suited to these things. At the thought of her wife, Byleth turned her gaze away from the bleak rain and over to the woman in red armor sitting next to her, listening intently to what the others were saying and offering her own opinion in words Byleth couldn't hope to understand. It really was remarkable to her that Edlegard could keep up with any of this, let alone engage with it. Then again, she was raised to be a ruler. Byleth was raised to be a mercenary. She just happened to fall in love with the Emperor of the Empire. Weird how life works like that. A few years ago, Byleth wouldn't have even thought about anything other than her next job. Now, she had friends, and people who looked up to her, and she's found love with one of the most powerful people in the world. Someone who, to everyone else, was the cold and calculating ruler of a massive empire, who commanded both respect and fear in equal measure. But Byleth knew Edlegard was so much more than that. She was a kind person who thought about others' needs and sought to help them however she could. A woman who took life by the reins and refused to let it buck her off, no matter how hard it tried. She also happened to be a super cute dork. Byleth still keeps the picture Edlegard drew of her on her person at all times, both to remember how sweet her wife is and to embarrass her at dinner parties. Byleth was suddenly pulled for her thoughts as she heard the sound of someone clearing their throat, looking around the meeting table to see everyone staring at her. Looking back at her wife, she could see Edlegard looking down at the table with a light blush on her cheeks. Byleth looked back at the others before whispering, "I got caught staring again, didn't I?" Edlegard simply nodded in reply, still refusing to look up from the table. Truth be told, this was far from the first time this had happened. In fact, it happened in almost all of their meetings since the war ended. Every time someone would have to snap Byleth out of it, and Edlegard would get all quiet and embarrassed. It was the one time anyone else saw that side of her other than Byleth. Well, and Dorothea, but that woman can make anyone blush. As cute as it was, though, Byleth also knew it wasn't exactly appropriate for official meetings, so she quietly apologized to the room and tried to pay attention to the rest of the meeting, a task she didn't really succeed in, especially once she felt Edlegard's hand find her own under the table, grasping it with a light squeeze. Byleth often wonders if it's normal to fall in love with someone multiple times a day like she does with Edlegard. Once the meeting is over, Byleth and Edlegard walk together through the halls of the castle. Edlegard is talking about the various ongoing problems that were brought up in the meeting, and how she's working to solve them. Byleth still doesn't understand half of it, but she's pretty sure Edlegard is just looking for someone to talk at other than herself anyway. Her attention is brought back to the conversation, though, when Edlegard herself suddenly asks her a question. "So, if those arrangements suit you, would you like to enjoy dining with me tonight? If you aren't busy, of course." Edlegard quickly finished her request, while looking away from Byleth. Even after getting married, Edlegard still acts like every date they have is their first one. It's rather adorable as far as Byleth is concerned. "I think you know better than anyone I wouldn't be, Elle. I'm surprised you're free, though. Usually you're so busy I hardly see you." Edlegard sighs, a hint of guilt in her eyes that makes Byleth feel slightly guilty herself. It's true, though. The pair hardly get any time to themselves with all the things Edlegard has to do around the Empire. The fact that Edlegard actually has free time is almost hard to believe. "Well, usually yes, I am quite busy, but most of the tasks I was set to do today I can assign to Hubert and Ferdinand. So I figured, why not do so and maybe have some time with you instead? I've very much missed our free time together." Edlegard gives Byleth's hand a squeeze as she finishes her sentence, and Byleth falls in love with her for what has to be the third or fourth time today. "I've missed it too, Elle. I'd be delighted to have dinner with you." "I love you." Edlegard's pale skin suddenly turns a deep shade of red as she replies, "I love you too, Byleth." Byleth wasn't much of a dress person growing up. Battle armor was more for functions and fashion in her mind, though Edlegard's war attire did give her more to think about on that topic. But generally, she did not wear her own dresses. Then she started dating Edlegard, and suddenly she needed much more formal clothing. One of their first dates was just taking Byleth out for dresses, after she kept showing up to dinners in her old, banged-up armor. Now, as Byleth checks herself out in the full-length mirror, soothing down the black silk dress she's wearing with a keyhole neckline, she often worries might be showing just a little bit too much. Though Edlegard isn't exactly going to complain about that, Byleth finds she quite likes dresses. At least, as a rare treat. Feeling like she's ready to go, Byleth takes one more spin around the front of the mirror before heading out. Usually she'd be getting ready to go to some kind of fancy restaurant, but given the rain that's still pouring down outside, and Edlegard's desire for a much quieter dinner tonight instead, Byleth is heading up to the castle kitchens. Once she gets there, she sees a small table has been set up, a red tablecloth spreading out over it with 2 plates set up on either side of a slowly burning candle in the center. Walking over to the other side of the tables is Edlegard, who quickly stands up as Byleth walks in, smoothing down her own red dress. The two take a moment to just stare at each other, both still failing to find words to describe the beauty they see in the other after all this time. Eventually, though, Byleth breaks the silence first. "You look beautiful, Elle. More so than usual, anyway." A small smile crosses Byleth's lips at the blush that gives Edlegard as she sits down at the table, the two of them settling into a conversation before the dinner arrives, a fancy meal prepared by the castle chefs. Byleth has always had trouble remembering the names of the fancier things they serve around here, but they all taste good, so she's not going to complain. Edlegard and Byleth continue to talk while they eat, and the conversation continues after the food is done too. It continues even after a member of staff collects the plates and leaves to get them cleaned. It only finishes as the candle in the middle of the table finally burns out after the several hours it was burning. The two women caught in surprise as the room suddenly gets much darker than it was before. They both look at each other for a second, before a small laugh escapes them both. "I guess we got kind of caught up, huh?" Byleth says as she starts to get up, getting a nod from Edlegard in reply. "Still, I had fun. Spending time with you always makes you wish it could go on forever," Edlegard says with a sigh at the end. Byleth quickly moves around the table to her, pulling Edlegard into a strong embrace. "Hey, I'm not going anywhere. You know that. We'll get to do this more and more as the years go by. Then one day, when we're both old, we'll look back at this as one of those many fantastic days we had together." Edlegard doesn't reply, simply tightening the embrace and attempting to fight back tears. After some time, they both slowly separate from each other, taking another moment to look each other in the eye before Edlegard speaks. "I love you, Byleth." Byleth smiles before taking Edlegard's hand. "I love you too, Elle. Now come on. It's pretty late, and I think we could both use the sleep." Edlegard nods, and followed Byleth out of the kitchen, the two hand in hand as they began walking back to their room. As soon as Edlegard looked back at the table, a small smile on her face as she thought about her life with Byleth, about everything that's happened, and will happen, about getting old with Byleth, after a life of so much hardship and loss, after everything that she's had to do and had done to her. After all of that, it's strange to think that she's finally happy. Happy to be with someone. Happy about the future. With those thoughts in her head, she turns back away from the table and walks forward to her and Byleth's room, more ready for the future than she had ever been before.